interesting, actually, Ian's introduction about how we define ourselves, because I totally agree with Ian. I'm first and foremost a psychologist, a behavioral scientist, and yet secondarily, I'm a health psychologist. And indeed, working in the field of suicide research and prevention, I think it's what I've tried to do, and what I'll try and highlight over the course of the hour, is try to move beyond our traditional boundaries, our traditional silos. And indeed, all of the work that I'll talk about this morning is in collaboration with people from different parts of the discipline of psychology, from clinical psychology, health psychology, and beyond. But also we work cross disciplines as well, and indeed with psychiatry and medicine more broadly. So I agree with that entirely. In terms of what I can bring to you as occupational psychologists, and again, Ian has hit the nail on the head, is every one of us in this room, what percentage of people who are treated for depression take their own life? 2, 20, 6, I heard? 15. It's 4%, right? It's less than 5%. So the question then becomes, so if I had have done a straw poll with you at the start of the lecture, or the talk, saying, why do you think people kill themselves? Top of that list will have been depression. Of course, because usually it happens, suicide occurs in the context of depression. But depression is not the reason why people kill themselves. It's the context in which it happens. But the overwhelming majority of people, 96% of people who are treated for depression, don't end their life. So what we've been trying to do over the last 20 years is understand what is it about that 4% of people with depression who are treated for depression who take their own lives. How are they similar and different from the 96% who don't? And arguably, there are services in place for those vulnerable individuals. But in addition to that, a worrying finding, I can't say worrying very well. How do you say it? You say it nearly as bad as me. It's like the word P-O-O-R, per. Well, obviously, or power, Scottish power. It's like, anyway, it doesn't matter, right? Where was it? Got to, where did it get to? Worrying, yeah, right. The concerning bit was, when we assess people's social perfectionism at baseline, those individuals who had high levels of social perfectionism, but crucially reported low levels of stress, right? Low levels of stress and high social perfectionism, they were as likely to self-harm as those individuals who reported high levels of stress. So if we were to investigate that scientifically, the argument is the presence of these volitional factors should distinguish people who think about suicide from people who attempt suicide. It's not the motivational phase factors. So I'll go through these because these are important. So the things like, the first one is having the access to the means of suicide. So one of the best public health interventions we can do to reduce suicide is restrict the access to the means of suicide. And that can be restricting the access to the means to a bridge, or making it safe, catalytic converters in cars, making paracetamol in 16s and in blister packs. They're all things about restricting the access to the means of suicide. Because we know that when somebody becomes acutely suicidal and they've formulated a plan, in addition to that, if we think about theoretical models, one of the key challenges is that thing I've banged on about time and time again, the difference between thinking and attempting suicide. We need to do much more work on these automatic and reflective processes, because we focus far too much on the sort of self-report stuff. We need to look at the combination. And there's no one right answer. And crucially, that not only will the theoretical models help us understand why somebody becomes suicidal or attempts suicide, it should form the basis for interventions. Now, to finish, I want to end with the words of, sadly, somebody else who has taken their own life. And there's a suicide note I was sent pretty recently. But again, it highlights this unbearable pain that people experience when they become suicidal. And I think it's a really apt way to sort of tie things together. And hopefully some of what I said earlier, or during the talk, and the previous suicide note, we can somehow see.